When it comes to the Denver Broncos offense, the wide receiver room has a ton of options, including larger roles for Troy Franklin and Devaughn Vele. We'll break it down on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We know it's your team every day. Thank you so much to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day, however you choose to do so. And to make sure you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team, hit that subscribe or that follow button wherever you get your podcast or on YouTube. Become an everydayer so you stay in the know as to what's happening with your favorite team. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, site expert over there at predominantlyorange.com. We got a lot to break down here on this Monday bonus podcast episode of the show, recapping Monday's practice as it is officially game week as they prepare for the San Francisco 49ers. We'll go through why Devaughn Vele and Troy Franklin are primed for bigger roles and what that's looking like at training camp and the connection that they have with Bo Nix. And on top of that, we'll go through some of the training camp standouts, including Devin Key, Lucas Kroll, and young guys like Sam Ehlinger slinging the rock. We'll go through all that on today's show. Sayre, Monday's practice in the books. It was a hot one in Dove Valley here, but I think we have to talk about these wide receivers a lot more. It's so often the conversation on social media is who's wide receiver two? What does the depth chart look like? And I'm going to tell Broncos Country this right now. The depth chart's not going to matter. Sean Payton has a lot of wide receivers that he's going to play. And I'm excited to talk about two guys that think are going to have larger roles than people think.
It's going to be exciting to see how Sean utilizes these receivers all throughout the season, because we know he's kind of a madman when it comes to different personnel groupings. He likes to mix it up. He likes to throw different guys out there, to the point that you and I had talked on a number of post-game shows like, hey, maybe stick with the same group of guys for a little bit and see if they can get any momentum going. But obviously, if things are going well, you're not going to really mind the fact that he's throwing a bunch of different players out there. It's when you've got rookie receivers dropping passes or not being timely, or they're committing penalties when they get their lone chance to be out there, things like that, that you're kind of sitting there saying, hey, why not stop with the different personnel groupings and just keep these guys out there? But I think what we've seen in training camp at this point is that this young receiver group, with its variance of skill set, is going to really be able to give Sean that variety of options. That's not just going to be the spice of life, but it's going to be a variety of options that keeps defenses on their heels all throughout games, because you got so many guys that can be weapons after the catch, guys who can take the top off of defense, guys who can win with size, guys who can win with, power in the open field in so many different ways. I really can't wait to see, and especially this year's camp breakout story, Cody, I feel like, is Troy Franklin.
Yeah, no, it is 100%. Troy has had such an impressive training camp here. And look, we're talking about him making plays, catching the football, getting downfield, used in the short to intermediate, but I would highlight his blocking today. Now, obviously, in Monday's practice, the Broncos, they were in a helmet. They had some positions had shoulder pads. It was a light day because the Broncos aren't going to go crazy when they were going to have a hard scrimmage against the 49ers on Thursday before that preseason game on Saturday. So it's about being smart this week here. But Troy has become, I'd say, a willing blocker here. Not to say that he wasn't last year, but I'm saying this is a guy who, when you watch him during these practice reps, he's going out there and he's attacking, taking the right angles on defensive backs there. But, man, he's coming up big. Now, what I want to mention is so many people are caught up on this depth chart conversation, which the Broncos will, I think, this week release their unofficial depth chart, which nothing to read into it at all. If anyone has known Sean Payton the way that they do it, he says, I put it out there just because we're required by the league to do it. Don't read into it in any way. What we're seeing from this wide receiver room, Sayre, and this is something I don't think anybody's talking about enough, Sean Payton is actively platooning multiple guys, right? Look, Courtland Sutton's going to be the top dog. When you look at overall snaps this season, if he stays healthy, he's going to get the most snaps at wide receiver out of anybody. And you factor in Evan Ingram at his role, but that's kind of that tight end receiving threat type of role there that he's going to play. Devaughn Vele very much right now still kind of goes back to what we talked about at OTAs and mandatory minicamp before he missed some practices with that undisclosed injury there. Devaughn Vele is very much like when you have Courtland on one side, you have Vele primarily on the other side, and there's times where you can have both these guys there because Vele's working slot and also on the outside. Same thing with Courtland. Courtland's working on the outside. He's working the slot. But what I've seen a lot of when the Broncos come out in 11 personnel, we're seeing a large presence of Courtland Sutton, Devaughn Vele primarily, and Troy Franklin, which I like it. I'm not going to, I'm going to sit here and say, like, I'm going to pull a John Gruden and say, nicey. That's got me feeling nicey at this point because you have good height there. I mean, Troy's a little bit shorter than obviously Devaughn Vele and Courtland, but man, I mean, you talk about just getting guys in, and then behind him, it's Pat Bryant, it's Trent Sherfield. These guys are all rotating in, and they're getting a ton of reps, which I think Sean is going to do a lot of. And I don't want to forget Marvin Mims. Marvin, I think, is still in that gadget role right now here for the Broncos, and it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. And because last year he played only 286 snaps. Cody, we've talked about the low percentage of snaps for Marvin Mims last year. 297. Troy Franklin played 386. I got my wires crossed there on the numbers, but kind of crazy to think about that. Troy Franklin played nearly 100 more snaps than Marvin Mims last year. But what's going to be really interesting about what you're talking about here is a complete renovation of just think about a room in your house that how it's all set up, and you have your table, your chairs, or your couch, and your TV set up, your fireplace, all these things. Just imagine leaving one day and coming home and everything is different. Everything's completely changed on the inside. You're like, I don't even recognize this place. That's what it's going to be like with offensive personnel for the Denver Broncos this year, because the second leading wide receiver in terms of snaps played last year was Lil Jordan Humphrey, followed by Devaughn Vele, followed by Troy Franklin. So it's going to be a completely different group here. You're gutting the tight end position as well. I mean, last year's top snaps guys were obviously Adam Troutman, Nate Adkins, Lucas Krull. So this is going to be a completely reshaped offense with different guys who are going to be intentionally getting involved, not to mention Evan Ingram. So it's going to be completely just off the wall different from what we're expecting based on last year. It's going to be nothing like that. So I think that's what's really exciting to me about these personnel groupings. Also, the Broncos using these guys in situational drills that they're doing and working. Okay, it's this situation in a game, and this is the down and distance, or this is what we got to do at the end of half, and they're putting these guys out there for those situations. That's what gets me really excited.
It should be 6 wide receivers on the 53-man roster. If all these guys stay healthy from now until roster cuts, I would be shocked if it's not 6, because who are you cutting at this point? That's not your primary rotational guys here. You're certainly not going to cut Trent Sherfield just because he's your key special teams guy. And look, he's had himself a nice camp as well. Let's go through a couple of highlights here in terms of why I think we should talk about Troy Franklin a lot more. Let's also talk about Bo Nix, right? People are freaking out over some interceptions in practice. Now, let's be open here. Interceptions in practice aren't a big deal. I don't know why we suddenly have made this a huge deal in the social media discourse side of things. But, Bo, obviously a few practices ago, he had one interception. He had another one that was a illegal contact, Pat Surtain initially. So, people were saying, okay, 2 interceptions on the day, when in reality, if we're actually counting it, it would have been 1 there. He had 1, obviously, in the Saturday scrimmage, and he had 1 today in 7-on-7 to Devin Key, who made a terrific play. He did throw 1 in the first team period that the Broncos had, but Zach Allen jumped off sides at that point, so it was a free play. So in a real game, it's not even counting. So I just don't care about this whole conversation. Like, I feel like I have to argue about it. Like, I don't want to, and so I'm not going to. But I'm just saying, like, even Sean Payton was asked about it after practice, and he said, we're not charting interceptions like hurricanes here. So take of that what you will. But, man, Troy Franklin had a couple of big plays. I mean, the Broncos had a move the ball period in that final team drill there. Troy Franklin heavily involved in getting some reps out there, including having a big 15-plus yard catch against Pat Surtain there, coming back to the football to allow the Broncos in a final minute move the ball period to get closer to field goal range, which ended up with Will Lutz booting it in. I thought Bo Nix and the Broncos offense had a pretty good day outside of what I would say was that first team period in 7-on-7. But, man, he went to Courtland Sutton on a deep 20-yard play on 3rd and 9, and he had Dondre Tillman bearing down on him on the right side. Bo did a lot of really good things here today. And, of course, I think you're only going to see some of the negative stuff amplified. Bo and the offense had themselves a bounce-back big day here today for the Broncos offense. I felt like we had to highlight that here. And Devaughn Vele, Troy Franklin, Courtland Sutton, these guys are a massive component for that, as well as Pat Bryant rotating heavily into the mix. We're excited, Broncos country, and you're going to see your first look here this Saturday when the Broncos take on the 49ers in the NFL preseason. But we got a lot to break down as well, including some other camp standouts from Monday's practice in Denver, including a third-string quarterback who is slinging the rock and getting these undrafted guys in the mix. And on top of that, a cornerback who just continues to have himself a strong camp. We'll highlight that and much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion because it brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink minus the alcohol into a quick and energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. And let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized.
Cody, I really needed an extra boost. I was trying out for the high school golf team. We had to hit 50 on 9 holes 3 times in a row in order to make the team. And the last round that I played was the rainiest round of golf I've ever played. My final tee shot, I was out there. I'll never forget. I took my hack and my club literally flew out of my hands into a tree. And of course, golf is all about the people that you share it with and having those good times just in general. So if you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use our promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders, and whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-hour energy shots today.
Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over there at the Gametime app, and we've all been there logging on early and waiting for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Well, you don't have to do that. You don't have to worry about that with the Gametime app because live music should be about making memories and not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. And that's where Gametime comes in because Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever because prices actually drop the closer it gets to showtime, and you could save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals.
Cody, I have 4 kids, right? So you never know when plans are going to change. When you make your plans to go see your favorite, music artist or your favorite comedian, oftentimes kids can be unpredictable. So if plans change, guess what? You've got the Gametime Guarantee. The Gametime Guarantee, it's got your back with cancellation protection and more. Take all the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Training camp keeps rolling along for the Denver Broncos, who are out there in shells for Monday's practice. And of course, your boys, Cody and Sayre, got you covered with training camp standouts, news, notes, everything else that you want to know about your favorite team, the Denver Broncos. If you haven't already done so, everybody, we appreciate you so much taking the time to hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Cody, let's talk about training camp standouts from today. I obviously saw your updates coming through on Twitter and really just seeing a lot of positive things about a number of young players on this team, even with the guys out there in shells. We know that it's not 100% full contact, but obviously guys are still out there making plays. Who do you think was the biggest standout, though? We talked about the receivers. Did anybody else have a really great day out there at practice on Monday?
Hey, Sam Ehlinger can sling the football. I mean, we've seen for 2 straight practices just some athleticism to his game there, but the ability to throw it on the run, I think, accurate. And some of those plays have been big plays to Jerjuan Newton, Courtney Jackson. He had a bomb to Courtney Jackson, who got behind the defense here today. You saw him connect with Pat Bryant a little bit. But then you got other guys getting involved in the mix as well. I mean, Sayre, tight end, we've been talking about Adam Troutman and Evan Ingram. And, hey, Caleb Lohner was making plays in week 1. Today was the first day where we really saw Lucas Kroll make plays and get targeted. I mean, one of the team periods the Broncos had, it was their second one. Bo Nix found Lucas Kroll for a beautiful dime throw, a laser across the middle of the field where he kind of dove for it and caught it, was able to secure it with, a linebacker bearing down on him, in coverage. It was a fantastic play. Would have been about 15 to 20 yards from that downfield depth angle there. I thought he had his best training camp practice of the day. And obviously, you want to see him stack that. And then you want to see them carry that over into this weekend's preseason game, because for Sean Payton, it's really all about the larger body of work. You can have a guy go out there and have a really good practice. They're not going to remember that one practice. They're going to remember, hey, this guy did this almost on a consistent basis every day. He did it in the games. That's where the evaluation comes in. And I even had a chance to ask Sean Payton about how to evaluate these young guys when you have 3 preseason games. And he even alluded to it that it's going to change because now you're going to transition eventually to 2 preseason games when the NFL puts that regular season game, the 18th one in there. The evaluation of these guys, it has to be the body of work. And ultimately, you see these joint practices, and that's where you're going to factor in more. So can these guys do that against San Francisco on Thursday?
I think they can, and I think they will. This is a young San Francisco defense that obviously they're going to be out there trying to prove themselves as well. And Robert Saleh is going to have those guys ready to go for the season. I know that I remember the one time when he was with the 49ers, Cody, he coached a game against the Broncos that everybody thought Denver was going to beat the 49ers. I don't know if you remember this game, but both teams were kind of beaten and battered. And Robert Saleh had a bunch of practice squad dudes out there absolutely dominating. I think it was Case Keenum or one of those quarterbacks that the Broncos used to have, the former, but I believe in him based on that game. He is that dude when it comes to coaching up a defense. And I think that he'll have these guys ready, and young guys are always going to be hungry out there fighting to make plays. So I think that does amplify, to kind of circle it all back, what the Broncos are going to do. And to your point about only being able to evaluate a couple of preseason games, we're seeing the Broncos get ahead of the curve, right? They're getting ahead of the curve by having multiple teams that they're going against in joint practices this year, because it gives you a chance to evaluate against other rosters, against other teams that they don't know necessarily what you're doing out there. They don't know your installation plan, whatever it may be. I think that that's a huge advantage now, getting those 2 joint practices going. And that's not groundbreaking or anything. Teams have done that before, but you're getting kind of a head start on eventually only having 2 preseason games and getting that additional evaluation phase of your training camp process. I like that the Broncos are doing that. And it also gives you another chance to scout a couple of other teams and say, hey, who could we maybe poach if they cut this guy or that guy? I mean, that has worked out pretty well in the past for the Denver Broncos with the guys like Tim Patrick. So certainly going to be a fun week of practice for these guys.
I'm excited for it too, just because then you get a different look, look you haven't been practicing against. I think for this Broncos defense, that 49ers offense, it does incorporate a lot of that wide outside zone and sets things up. It's that old Shanahan system. And obviously Kyle's calling the plays there, running his dad's playbook and finding ways to evolve that almost on a yearly basis. It's going to be a good challenge with Kittle, with McCaffrey, and even Purdy there. I'm excited for this Broncos defense to get that look, but I'm also excited for Bo Nix and this offense to get that look of that Robert Saleh defense, right? And look, we're not going to overreact to training camp practices. We're going to, not overreact to preseason games. It's, hey, the preseason, you want to see guys progress. Like your starters are going to get some reps. We know that they're going to play. The Broncos are going to play some of their starters. But the idea is like, it doesn't matter if the Broncos win or lose. That's not what we're evaluating. We're evaluating the players here in these 3 preseason games that certainly the team is going to have there. I want to give a shout out to Nick Bonito and Riley Moss. I mean, Nick Bonito had a play. I'll say this could have been the play of the day if he was able to corral it. There was one play where the Broncos, it was in a team period. Bo Nix was hot in this period. The only incompletion or the only negative play there, and it wasn't necessarily a negative by Bo, it was Nick Bonito dominating here. It was a kind of like a boot action, bringing Courtland Sutton, across the field there. He went to go dump it off, and Nick Bonito just shot through the offensive line, almost picked it from that standpoint behind the line of scrimmage there. It was a crazy play, and all of a sudden I thought to myself, I was like, Nick Bonito should have just went like this, afterwards. He should have done the money sign like cha-ching, because if he's doing that in the regular season, that price is going to skyrocket. The Broncos should find a way to get a deal done with him there. And then Riley Moss, man, he's had a terrific camp, Sarah. I mean, there's been so many questions that people have had on social media, and you and I have been kind of saying it all along. It's unquestioned that Riley is the cornerback 2 opposite of Pat. He's had some good plays against Courtland Sutton.
I love hearing that. I think that it builds his confidence so much to be able to go out against a guy like Courtland Sutton and make those plays. And for Riley, I think that you're seeing kind of that chip on his shoulder a little bit, right? When people are talking, these guys hear it, right? You know that. I know
Yes.
you and Riley chat and things like that. And I'm not putting words in your mouth or anything, but I would reckon that he's got a chip on his shoulder. I think that he's probably heard all this noise about his starting job is up for grabs, everything that went down against T. Higgins. You and I have had to defend the guy almost as heavily as we defended Bo Nix last year at times, because of the things that are being said about him. But it's one of those situations where we're ignoring reality for the hypothetical for no good reason, right? He was such a devastating loss after that Raiders game. And then after the Bengals game, now it's like, well, his starting job is probably up for grabs. I just think that Riley is one of the key young players of the core of this team that next offseason we're going to be talking about. And when is Riley Moss going to get his extension? How much is that going to be worth? Because we're already at that time as of 2026 Broncos country. And I think that conversation will be happening big time.
I'm excited about it. I've just been very pleased with the development and the progression of these guys. And now you get to see it unleashed a little bit against San Francisco. And if Nick Bonito is shining in training camp against San Francisco, look, he's probably not going to play much. He'll probably play a couple series. I imagine starters will play a series or two. And obviously that first preseason game, maybe they'll play into the second quarter, or maybe even they might play the whole first half against Arizona. We'll see. But and just so many guys like Riley with Bonito and just a handful of others, we're going to see this team finally take the field this Saturday for the preseason. Sayre and I, we're going to have you covered every step of the way. But with that said, Broncos country, that'll wrap up today's bonus episode recapping Monday's practice. Make sure you stay tuned tomorrow after Tuesday's practice, because Sayre and I, we're going to sit down. We're going to talk about the story of the day before the Broncos head off to San Francisco, who stood out, and more. As training camp continues, we're one step closer to Saturday's game. We'll see you then.